What's up? I am David Long and welcome to the monthly Patreon participant Q&A. What's up? Hope everybody's doing well. Today we are here with Kai and Michael and Sal, and basically every month the participant level Patreons of Non-Reductionism are going to get to come on and do a Q&A with me, and this is the first one. So let's jump right into the questions, shall we? So Michael, you are unmuted. Would you like to present your first question, your first Q for the A?
My first question. What do you see is the long-term direction of non-reductionist philosophy?
This is a great and important question. So long-term goals are establishing non-reductionism as an accessible worldview with tests and accreditation. So this is going to be like one of the first things that needs to be worked on. Basically just making a bunch of the videos to establish the basics of the philosophy and teaching the details of the theory. After I finish the basic level of teaching, then I'm going to also turn that into a course and give accreditation and tests. So that way there can be people who get their certificate of completion and then it's like officially known that they know the basics of non-reductionism. And then after that, they'll be like officially qualified to speak with authority on what non-reductionism is and teach non-reductionism to other people. So another long-term goal is to create and support integration systems. So basically setting up systems within communities around non-reductionism to get people into some kind of a pipeline or like a path to integrate further and further deeper into levels of the community. Like one of the ways to do that is by engaging with this accreditation and these tests. We're also hoping for the adoption of applications by professionals across fields, healthy online and offline communities, healthy hierarchy and leadership systems within our community. A lot of these meta theory groups and communities are kind of just a free-for-all. Anybody can set themselves up as a leader, and it's also completely unofficial. So we have further goals still. And so making sure that we actually have like established levels of hierarchy and ways to initiate people up into leadership is going to be really important. So we also need systems and methods to process tensions within the community and also systems and methods to upgrade the theory together over time. Ultimately, though, the biggest picture goal is to set up non-reductionism as a social movement to transition the world into more healthy systems and upgrade humanity. We have really big ideas for how these ideas can impact the world, and long-term, that's our mission. So there's going to be different phases of the unfolding of this plan. So currently we're in phase 1. This is where I'm still making the intro YouTube videos. We have some of the stuff, the basic version of the website. We have a link tree. We have the Facebook group. Join the Facebook group if you haven't already. You can look it up on Facebook and find it. We still need, some other social media stuff like Instagram and TikTok and some like more small term kind of content stuff. We have Patreon. We need merch for people to feel included. Things like mugs and t-shirts. Eventually we'll, hats and pins and badges and stickers, all that fun stuff. I also have plans for a couple books in the works. So it's not going to be just YouTube videos, but there's also going to be a basic intro book, and also working with another member of the community on a book about 4P4Z for more professional type applications of epistemology. But right now we're really just trying to set up the non-reductionist YouTube channel with the courses and get the test ready to get this first level of integration together. I also do private coaching and teaching. Some of the next goals are going to also be to upgrade the webpage more, take it to like a version 2, to establish more of an ability to build community on that website, profiles and meetups and events, blogs and newsletters. Here we are now doing Q&As. That's an extension of it. Eventually also interviews and guests. And once this first basics course and things are set up, then we'll also extend into like meetups in local places, because there will be qualified leaders to teach non-reductionism to other people in their communities. And that's getting towards the end of phase 1. Let me say more about phase 1. That's more the outside stuff. On the inside stuff, not just like what we're putting out to the world, but like what we're working on behind the scenes, we're going to be looking for more supporters like academics, media and press who will talk about it, activists who will potentially want to apply some of our methods and ideas within their activism, businesses, professionals, influencers who can advocate for non-reductionism. And I'll also be working on putting together a group of leaders within the community and start to work with developing more groups and then refining our systems and building projects together. Eventually, once we get enough different meetups and things happening in different places, we'll also develop like a meta leadership group where we try to organize leaders in different places to figure out how we can work together to do our work in our own communities better. Like, what are some methods and some things that are working for you? What are you struggling with? That kind of thing. So in phase two, on the outside, then I'll start working on non-reductionism, advanced courses and tests. These things will have more to do with like the application of non-reductionist philosophy in different contexts. Non-reductionist life practice, non-reductionist religion, spirituality, non-reductionist business, non-reductionist this, non-reductionist that, all the things. Then I'll put out books about each one of these topics. So this will be the level 2 advanced version of non-reductionism. And this is where hopefully also professionals will start to apply it in their context. And then maybe even people in those different fields will collaborate with me on these different books as it relates to the application of non-reductionism in their field. Maybe then we'll also start to have webinars and workshops and conferences. Maybe I'll travel around and go to the different meetups in different places, and we'll see how we can further that engagement. So that's phase two. I think phase one will take about a year or so. Phase two, hopefully like another year or so, I'd say like maybe 1 to 2 years per phase. And then after those things are in place, that's when we're going to really start to do the non-reductionist revolutionary movement. And there will be like a handbook about that. And that's when we'll start to utilize our movement in different places to try to have a bigger impact on the local cultures and governments and all those kinds of things. That's more the outside stuff. The inside stuff is like the meta leadership. We'll also probably come out with a second version of the map in phase two with more upgrades and stuff. There will also be new projects that come out of these groups, and then probably like a meta leadership version two that'll start to integrate into this larger movement. So that's basically where we're going with a lot of this stuff. There are very big picture goals in terms of what we're trying to do with all of this, and it's very ambitious, and it's going to be a very long, very big project. And ultimately, that's why also we need to initiate in other leaders, because it's going to have to last beyond me. It's basically creating a new system that will continue even beyond my lifetime. All right, Michael, how do you feel about that answer to your question?
I think you also answered a lot of the second and third questions as well.
Yeah, I think I started to potentially touch on them. Maybe I'll say a little bit more. Do you have any like clarifying questions or anything that you want to ask about what I just said?
You had three phases. Phase one was generally about community building and some of the basic concepts. And then phase two was more advanced and applying it in different contexts. And then phase three seemed to be a lot more about, rather than having core group, a general group, it was a lot more about the general community and a lot more influence, but maybe slightly more spread out. That was sort of the general gist that I got.
I have plans for how we can take this movement into the world, and I already have a good amount of work done on that book as well. The reason I kind of only talk about up to phase three is because that's like a whole other can of worms to try to talk about the details of all that. So, yeah.
It's one of those fog of war type things of you don't know what's coming up. You know the direction that you're heading. You can see like a mountain peak. You just don't know the exact path to get there. So yeah, no, that makes sense. That like you have a general idea for phase one and phase two. By the time you're partway through phase two, you're going to have a lot better idea of what phase three actually is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The details will come more together, and there will have to be more of like a flex flow and a coordination with a bunch of other leaders. And so it won't just be David's ideas and David's plan at that time. We'll be working on it together. And so it'll be more than just whatever I could say about it.
Yeah. So question two was, how do you intend to help steward both the concepts and community? I feel like you did a pretty good job with that, but is there any other?
Yeah, I would like to say that in regards to that question, I'm kind of in a little bit of a balancing act with that, like a balance between at first needing to take a more sort of top-down control type of approach to like make sure that the integrity of the project maintains and that it doesn't kind of go off the rails. But then once we get good integration and initiation systems set up and things are going better, then it'll be easier to initiate other people into leadership And then I'll just be like a member of the community at that point, hopefully a respected member who people will still want to ask questions about, and I'll have some influence. But like eventually I will release the top-down control into a group of initiated people who will share control, and then it will be off and running and doing its own thing. So that's kind of how I intend to sort of shepherd it into being through these stages.
I will point out the cybernetics sort of system design type of thing, where you do have like 5 different layers, and like the first layer, the people on the front line, and then there's some coordination systems, and then usually management is more like sort of level 3, and then level 4 is mostly dealing with all the weird exceptions, and then level 5 is more the general aim and direction. And I think for quite a while, you will be doing that aim and direction. So you'll be at that top level 5 bit. But as there are people who can do more things, you can come down and do other parts of it. But at the start, you're doing everything. And then eventually you will float around as needed, but you'll still be somewhat at the level 5, setting a direction, but hopefully finding people who can also do that. So yeah.
So I'm looking for those kinds of people who are going to be really excited and dedicated and passionate around this kind of project, and trying to figure out ways to plug them in and get them into the inner circles. I recently came up with a pretty cool graphic to try to explain these different inner circles of the community and the idea of building them up. So that'll be like a future video coming out here soon. Instead of just doing like a bunch of circles with circles inside of them or something like that, I built this graphic of like a circular community with different levels in it. It's going to be a cool video. Keep your eyes out for that. What's your next question, buddy?
How committed are you to it all?
I'm very committed. This is a lifelong project for me. I've already been, in some ways, working on it for 2 decades. The shape of the thing has changed here and there as I have been trying to work on it. The only time I really kind of took a break from it in the last couple decades was when I started my own video production company, and that was taking a lot of my time and energy and effort. And also, I was in that time kind of trying to figure out how to reform the integral community. That didn't really work out very well, as they're not very open to reformation. It's completely dogmatic in its and in its structure. So that's not really a possible thing to fix it and work within that. And that's why I ultimately quit. And then I worked on it for a while behind the scenes, like trying to figure out what the next thing to do would be. And so for a while, like when you didn't hear from me, I was still working on stuff. People didn't know about it. I was planning this next move into non-reductionism and trying to work out a lot of the kinks and get a lot of the stuff together. And now we're ready. And so here we are. When I first started making YouTube videos a long time ago, I would just turn on the camera and start recording and start working on it. And now I get a little bit into some analysis paralysis around it. Like I'm like, okay, this video has to be like up to this high standard. It's got to represent the community. It's got to last for like 10 years. It's got to be like done really well. And so I'm putting a lot of work and a lot of care into trying my best to make the best content I can possible. So I think it's going to be a little bit of getting the ball rolling before I'm really back into like a nice good flow with it, and things are just coming out and coming out. Like right now I'm doing some of the heavy lifting of getting it started. But once I'm like talking about the details of specific things, I think I'll be on a roll, and I'll be like coming out with stuff faster and faster and faster. And it'll be a little bit less graphic intense because I won't be explaining the whole system at once, So that's currently where I'm at with it. I'm very passionate about it. This is my lifelong project. I'll be working on it until I die. And yeah, I'm very dedicated to it. Thank you so much, Michael, for your excellent questions. I think that's very helpful for people who are new to the community and trying to understand like where we're going with it, and like the passions behind it, the reasons behind it, the things we're trying to achieve, and what the timeline is for when it'll really be up and going. And so that's, I think, really important questions.
Okay, hold on real quick. I want to talk to you for just a minute about Patreon. It used to be that I would just take whatever donations people wanted to give, and I'd put your name at the end of the video and we would call it good. But I've been putting more thought into how I can bring more value to my Patreons. So I still do that. I have the supporter tier. If you want to give $5 or $10 a month, I'll still put your name at the end of the video and thank you very much. We'll call it good. But if you want to get more involved and you want to get more value, here's a couple ways that you can do it. You can become a Patreon participant. These people, they still get their name at the end of the video, but they also get to participate in this monthly Q&A. And if you want to be a participant plus, you can still get all that, and you can come to a monthly private training just for other Patreon Participant Plus members. And if you want to do even more than that, I have the apprentice level Patreons. These people get everything that we've just talked about, and they get an hour or 2 hours of private training or coaching or whatever a month with me. So I do private training and coaching and things like that, usually ideally about an hour a week for about $300 a month. So this is actually a really good deal. If you want to get an hour a month with me or 2 hours a month with me, you can do that for $75 or $100 and actually save yourself some money. If you can't afford the full-time coaching, but you'd still like to check in every other week or just 1 2-hour-long session a week, maybe consider getting the Apprentice Plus package. So these are some of the things I have on offer. Consider supporting on Patreon. Also join the Facebook group and get more involved. But let's get back to the video.
So now I'm going to switch to Kai, who is the next person who submitted his questions. How you doing, Kai?
I'm doing great. I've been doing all sorts of different things. I'm Kai. I've been kind of around the meta space for maybe the last 5 years or something like this. You were the one to kind of show me some of these broader spaces, and that definitely was really eye-opening to be able to start perceiving the world in a completely new way that you just don't get from your day-to-day interaction with the world. My questions, being that some of these larger, broader perspectives have already been kind of covered, are more kind of detailed on the ground, like, well, how can we even apply some of these non-reductionist principles into the world? How can we like have some kind of an impact in the people's lives that are around us? So my first question is, as a creative, as a professional, how can I use non-reductionism to approach these interactions in a more meaningful way?
Okay, that's a very important question. And there's really hours and hours of an answer I could give to you, breaking down
Yeah,
a bunch of individual tools as it relates to different aspects of that project. Like I was saying to Michael, how to apply these things in different contexts is a phase 2 sort of question, something that I'll get into in hyper detail when I start talking about non-reductionist approach to business. But let me break down some of the basics, right? One of the first things that it can be really good for is evaluating others. And that's basically like finding employees and businesses and projects that are actually on your values level, who you actually want to work with in your company. Like I've done some consulting with managers before about how to find good employees, like this one business that I won't say the name of. They were more of like a postmodernist kind of business. And they kept on hiring people who were non-conventional, thinking that they were post-conventional just because they were non-conventional. And then they would get a bunch of cool people, but every once in a while they would get a person in there who was more red than green, and they would potentially cause a lot of problems, or more like impulsive, egoic, even like potentially dangerous and criminal. So just being able to make some of these distinctions, like the pre-trans distinction, is really helpful for that. So we can actually like understand how to tell the difference between people who are more post-conventional and who are more pre-conventional. Just because somebody looks like they're non-conventional doesn't mean that they're necessarily somebody we want to work with, right?
very much so.
That's one thing. I think it also is just helpful if you can sort of figure out what the value system is of other businesses that you want to work with, of like particular clients that you're going to work with, and like understand, okay, like how does this align with me, and like how can I work with them, right? Like how can I use language that's going to resonate with them? So this works both inside and outside, like with both sales and marketing, right? So if you're talking to a client, understanding where they're coming from in terms of like if it's a nonprofit and they have more postmodern green values, they care more about diversity and stuff like that, you can appeal to that. If they're more of like a business and they have to like meet certain things, well, then you can appeal to that. So understanding where your client is coming from is really important. But then even on the marketing side, like I know you have a video production company yourself. And so if your client is coming with these ideas like, oh, we want to do this kind of a project and we want to, work with you to get a marketing campaign going to make these ideas accessible to the community. It's like, okay, what are the values of the local community? How can I take their product and figure out how to market it in a way that is actually going to resonate with different people and find its right audience in the community? That's another really important, helpful way. There's also things like in terms of management, right? There's different management styles as it relates to people who are different types or at different stages. Some people like a more collaborative kind of style, and then some people even might like a more competitive sort of style. And so finding out what works with different types and different stages is going to be a really helpful way for you to like manage other employees in your business. There's also like self-assessment stuff, right? Like checking in with your own personality type. Like, what are the lines that you favor and the quadrants that you favor, and what are the ones that you might neglect? And figuring out how to bring an understanding of those things online so that way you can make sure that you're checking in with these things that you might normally neglect. So that way you can actually get a more holistic, well-rounded way of dealing with this stuff. There's other things too, like if you were in a group, there are things like integrative governance strategies where there's different ways of leading, like using tension processing systems, where you can do more like flex flow type leadership and figure out how to do problem solving more in like a long-term way. So there's a lot of tools that are on offer here. Also, with the new addition of modes and roles, if you can more intentionally step into particular modes, like almost like scheduling certain modes, like, okay, I need to, on this day, I need to schedule a brainstorming mode or like a planning mode. I need to go into that and I need to spend some time and intentionally do that. Or if you are intentionally figuring out how to craft a particular role for yourself in relation to your employees or your clients, like trying to figure out as a manager, like what do I do and do I not do? When I'm working with these clients, what do I do and what do I not do? Like, what does it mean to be in this role with these people? Because, like a lot of people have this idea of like, oh, I'm going to just be authentic. Well, sometimes being authentic is not appropriate or skillful. Sometimes the thing that we need to do is actually to be appropriate and skillful for the particular context and the person that we're dealing with. Sometimes there are things that is not appropriate for us as a manager or as a person working with another business to do. Michael is saying a mode I've found I need to step into intentionally more often is recovery, rest and recovery, not just always on. Totally. Yeah. Sometimes people get in that like grind set way of like, oh, power through. I got willpower. That's great. It's great to have willpower. It's great to get things done. But also, yeah, like even knowing, okay, now it's time for recovery mode. Now it's time for rest and relaxation mode. Now I need to chill. And actually, some people have a hard time making themselves actually chill, like putting their phone away, taking their mind off their work, like letting themselves like watch something that is just fun and not like, oh, I'm gonna like take this time while I'm chilling and watch videos on how I can do my business better. It's like, no, why don't you actually just chill? you know? So yeah, that's definitely an important one. And the more we live our lives in a conscious way with intention and like intentionally go into these particular modes and know what it is to be in these modes, the better we're going to get at conscious intentional living. So is that a good answer to your question, Kai?
That's a great answer. My next question moves into more of the philosophy, since non-reductionism is not trying to go super hard over to like the supernatural or religious spiritual side or the super hard like atheist, nihilist side. It's somewhere in between this hard agnosticism. I've heard you talk about it. And you even brought up some of these roles and modes in this previous question and what that might look like to walk inside of a more hard agnostic position. What does that look like?
Well, the hard agnosticism aspect of it is more about epistemology. So around that particular part, there is an importance put on not overstepping your bounds, not claiming things that you can't know about. So just having a real kind of honesty around the limits of our knowledge and the limits of our understanding. For me, for example, in the role of a teacher, that becomes a very important principle. You know how like doctors have the Hippocratic oath, do no harm? As a teacher, I have this oath of talk no shit. I'm not out here trying to say things that I don't know, or if I think something is questionable or something is just my opinion or something like that, I make sure that I qualify it as that. I'll be like, some people say this, or like, I personally think this, right? And then hopefully when I do say, we know this, it's already established that I wouldn't be saying that we know this unless I had really good reasons and evidence to be able to back up the fact that we know this. And so this makes me more trustworthy as a person. So there's that side of it. There's like the epistemic humility side of it. But you also mentioned nihilism. And on the other side of it is what I call sacred naturalism. So on the other side of having this kind of existential awakening, a lot of people describe awakening as good feelings like, oh, I feel bliss, I feel love, I feel joy. Like That's great, but a lot of times that's associated with superstition and bypassing. On the other side of an existential awakening, a lot of times there's a realization of the fact that not like everything is consciousness everywhere all the time, but actually maybe consciousness is something that is really rare in the cosmos. In the big picture of history, there's only a small, tiny corner of the galaxy, maybe here or there, little pockets of consciousness that blink on and off for a second in terms of the large, grand scheme of things. Part of an existential realization is realizing to some extent our insignificance as it relates to the big picture of everything in the cosmos. Maybe our real significance is more like in the temporary, impermanent, like relationships that we have with other people here and now. It's hard to say some of these things because, in an immediate sense, a lot of people don't want to hear some of these hard truths about our relationship to the cosmos as being insignificant, or that we don't live forever and we weren't birthed out of love by mommy and daddy with a divine purpose and all this stuff. A lot of these basically traditional ideas that I think need to be overcome. But on the other side of that, there is a bunch of wisdom and important things about life that need to be understood. Like, what about being grateful for every day that we get? Like, when you're not going to live forever and you'll never die, and that, like your soul exists for multiple life, like maybe on the other side of that, you start to appreciate every moment that you actually get to be here. On the other side of realizing impermanence, that nothing lasts, what you realize is that makes every moment special and important, right? So, like, I think there's this kind of gratitude and importance and responsibility. A lot of people are on this, like, just be, let things go, let things be. But, like, if you realize that every moment is an opportunity, imagine thinking about spiritual practice like that. Like, I have this opportunity right now to be able to say something important, to take responsibility, to do something good, to make a difference. And potentially, as the person who is maybe the most mature person in the room, maybe it's more my responsibility than anybody else's in this room to do something good, to like actually step up to that.
Honestly, it can be difficult sometimes because, like what Michael is saying about the recovery, and sometimes you got to like turn off. It can be difficult because you're engaging with so many different people, and every new job is a whole slew of new people who want to have that deep, intimate experience of being able to get to know another person and like have that opportunity. But and sometimes though it's just hard. It's hard to be able to be these things. This
Right.
is just really nice. That's definitely answering my question. Was there anything more you wanted to say about
I
that?
mean, I want to address what you just said just there.
Yeah.
I think it starts with this feeling of like, I must do something. I must be responsible. I must get involved. I must participate. I must engage. I must interact, right? But then the more, like you're saying, that you start to realize the limits of your own time and energy, you start to get better at picking your battles. You start drawing more boundaries around who I'm going to spend the time to argue with and who I'm not. Like, where can I make the biggest impact? What's the best use of my time? Like, the reason I'm doing this non-reductionist project is because I realize I have a very limited amount of time and energy, and I want to put my energy towards something that's going to make the biggest impact with the greatest depth for the greatest, to do the greatest good big picture. That doesn't mean that there aren't situations in which I won't engage with people who are lower down the spiral, but I really need to figure out what the best use of my time is. And I do have some kind of a formula that I've sort of developed for just this problem, and I'll probably share it more in the future, but it has to do with like these different factors of how close a person is to you in terms of, are they your family member? Are they your little brother or your little sister or your cousin or something like that? Like, how significant a role do you play in their life? Are they like someone close like that versus just a random stranger you see on the street? I think we have a bigger responsibility to people who we're close to and who see us in this kind of a close way. We need to put more effort with them, even if they're further down the spiral. Now, we also have to engage appropriately and meet them on their level, not try to yank them all the way up, but meet them where they're at, help them to be healthy where they're at, maybe help them to transition into the new stage, right? So there are people at different relationships to a particular stage. There are people who are new to a stage, people who are more established in a stage, maybe even stuck in a stage or comfortable in a stage. And there are people who are in the later part of a stage and they're already taking on ideas from the next stage. And they're kind of in this place where some of their old ideas aren't really serving them anymore. And they might be more ready for some kind of transformation. And we should recognize that because those are the people who potentially need us to help them and work with them in this kind of way the most. These other people who are more new to a stage or maybe more stagnant in a stage, with them, we want to use a more translation kind of approach. If it's like a Christian, maybe we can help use some of their Christian ideas to help them to be more healthy at whatever level they're at. Like, if you love God, you should be a good steward of the environment. Jesus says to love your neighbor, something like that, to help them be more healthy where they're at. But these are some of the different factors: translation versus translation. Where's a person at in their development, even in relation to the stage, helping them to move to the next stage where appropriate, and how close are we? Another thing that I want to say that most people, especially postmodernists, probably wouldn't agree with is if you see somebody who's being a racist or a Nazi or like doing some bad things, like advocating for stupid things in public, and you're not close to them, I think there's a social responsibility to give them negative feedback. We're not just being kind to everyone. If there are Nazis marching down your street, you have to do your part, your social responsibility to let them know they're not welcome here. They're not welcome in this community. These ideas are not okay. It's disgusting and shameful. And I think also people often judge whether an interaction is good, like in a very surface level kind of a way, where it's like, I was mean to them, so that's bad. Being kind is good, being mean is bad. And people will often say things like, well, that's not effective. Calling people shameful and stupid isn't effective. Well, I think it is effective because I think there's a larger process happening here beyond just the one person who changed this person's mind. If there are these Nazis and they're walking down the road, and then everybody who sees them and passes them by gives them strong negative feedback, it might not be those individuals necessarily who change their mind, but it's going to help build up their shadow to be bigger and scarier and stronger to the point where they're going to have to process it. And they're going to go to that person who's close to them and they're going to process it with them. It's kind of like a good cop, bad cop type of situation. Sometimes it's appropriate to be the bad cop. Sometimes it's appropriate with certain people to give them harsh, negative feedback and in a short term way where you don't even necessarily have to explain all the details to them. We all play our part in this kind of process. Another thing I might want to say is that part of being healthy at any stage of development is to give equal emphasis to all four quadrants in our general life and to put pressure on people from the stage right below us to change. And we have the biggest responsibility to the people in the stage right below us. So if you're at a non-reductionist stage of development, it's actually the people who are at the stages right below us, like yellow and green or whatever. These are the people who the least amount of people are able to help.
True.
If it's somebody who's blue or a traditional conformist or red, there's a bunch of people in society who can help them. And honestly, if people at these higher stages are constantly spending all their time like arguing with traditional people, that's just like sort of shooting fish in a barrel and like operating way below our weight class, you know, like what like you kind of have to ask yourself like why are you spending so much time doing that? Like there's more appropriate and important conversations for you to have that are further up the spiral. So I know went on a little bit of a rant and a tangent there.
Yeah, no, that was great. Non-judgment is not enough.
The performative self-contradiction is that a lot of times people at these green postmodern stages will end up criticizing people for criticizing people or judging people for judging people. Like they don't have a problem with this person spreading the bad ideas, but they'll definitely go on and attack the person who criticizes them like, oh, we should not judge. It's like, look, if we should not judge and we shouldn't criticize, then what are you doing right now? You're just making this person with the worst idea feel validated in their narrative of like, they're mean to me. I'm the victim. Anyways, I want to get back to your questions.
The third question, I feel like you've probably touched on some of this, but how can we best know that we're coming from a non-reductionist perspective? We can think all these things, we can have maps, we see the issues and problems like in Integral and how they've interpreted like spiral dynamics and like, hey, they think they're coming from a very clear perspective and that they're getting at, what it is. And yet we still see them engaging with more supernatural ideas and embracing far right-wing ideas and things like this. in very unhealthy ways. So how can we better understand how to even step into and hold a non-reductionist perspective and know that we're even doing it?
Yeah. Well, I'm the ultimate judge of everything. Pay me and I'll tell you. No, I'm just kidding.
Done.
No, the way that we know is, well, first of all, there are different lines that move up through different stages, right? And we know that the cognitive line always runs ahead. So grasping the ideas and putting them into practice are different things. Usually the cognitive line runs ahead, then the values line runs behind it, and then the moral line runs behind that. So first you have to understand a thing, then you have to, have the right values around it, and then you have to figure out how to act morally in relation to it. So first off, you have to understand these different factors, and it breaks down into these simple checklist of lenses: quadrants, levels, lines, states, types, and modes, right? So once you know about these different factors, then you start to skillfully and intentionally take them into account in your life. And usually when people first come across this philosophy, people start to immediately notice the things that they're lacking, the things that they need to work on. When all the stuff is put on the table, it's like, okay, I'm good at this, I get this, yes, 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 yes. But I need to work on that. I got to take this into account. Like, right. So if you know that you're a particular personality type or something like that, well, you have strengths around particular things. Maybe you favor particular quadrants, but you probably also need to do work in other quadrants to become more well-rounded. Maybe now you'll know that there are these different modes in an argument or something like that, where someone's throwing around a bunch of fallacies and you're like, this feels manipulative. But when you have names for the fallacies, you're like, that's an ad hominem, that's a straw man, that's a false dichotomy. Then you can actually start to engage with these arguments more skillfully and immediately spot them and know what they are. It's the same thing for modes. As soon as you give the mode a name and you use it intentionally, you can improve upon your ability to use the mode and actually navigate your life with modes and roles with more self-mastery, because now we have names around what we're doing and we can actually start to plan. That's kind of the problem, is that even if people get to the point where they start to do implicit integration and they start like valuing a lot of different things, if you don't have names for it, if you haven't turned it into a checklist, if you haven't like built a life practice around it, then you're just kind of like sort of implicitly doing it, maybe like barely consciously doing it. But when you're doing it intentionally, when you're checking in with the checklist intentionally, when you're going into these different modes intentionally, that's when you really know that you're doing it. We probably all, for probably all of our life, will still have certain areas of weakness or certain things that we still need to do more work on or certain things that we neglect. But at least if we know about it and we try to touch in with some of those things, we'll be doing better. So that's how you know, I think.
Word. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions, Kai. Good questions. Last but not least, Sal, what are your questions? How are you doing, first of all?
First of all, before my first question, I really, really want to say that I'm really glad that I get to be in this Q&A and probably the many more. And yeah, it feels great. It does feel like I benefited already from all the questions here. But I have my first question, which is why now? Like, why now for you, David? And why now for us? Why should we now care about non-reductionism? Like, why should we join it now? Like, in the time of what we're doing, in the time of our history as human? Yeah, that's my first question. Thank you.
That's a good question. Thank you, Sal. So why now? Well, first let me deal with the personally. Why now? For my personal history, these ideas evolved in relation to me being involved in the meta theory community for about 2 decades. So I have been teaching this stuff and thinking about these things and being critical and coming up with new ideas. So why now non-reductionism? I just put out a video about why non-reductionism is a better meta theory than other ones. Part of why non-reductionism is a better meta theory than these other meta theories like metamodernism and integral theory is because I got to see how these theories go wrong, how they don't live up to their own standards, how people break their own rules, or like the ways that they fail in like a social context or in like a social way, or like why have these ideas been around for 30 years and failed to make any kind of real big picture impact on the world. So basically, as a person who really cares very deeply about these ideas, getting them right, refining them and making them better and seeing their impact on the world, this is the next step. This is the next logical step in the progression of history. For people who don't know about meta theory and are just learning about it now, the why now historically might be because we live in a time where we have all the world's ideas at our fingertips. We live in a time where we have seen the problems with postmodernism, and we should start to also understand the problems with bias integration. People want to take into account a holistic perspective. They see that there's true and good things from all different worldviews, and they want to try to figure out a way to bring a lot of these ideas together in a way that honors the good and true things from all traditions without falling into the problems and pitfalls of all of these traditions. And so that's why non-reductionism historically, in terms of the unfolding of ideas. In terms of a socio-political situation in the big picture, have you seen the news?
Definitely.
Our systems are failing us at a massive rate. 10 years ago, I would have said, we're driving humanity off the cliff. Capitalism is this runaway train, and no one's at the wheel. I mean, the train doesn't have a wheel, but you know what I'm saying? No one's driving it. It's going off the edge, and it's taken us and like lots of other species on the planet with it. And even worse now, especially as an American, we see not only are the systems failing us, but they're actually moving in ways. Even growing up, I'm like, okay, we're getting over racism. There's not going to be another genocide. What is that saying? The arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I don't know if that's true anymore. Modernism is in line with capitalism and meritocracy and all this kind of stuff. They're fine with capitalism. That what's the problem? Like, it's good. Postmodernism, they don't judge. We don't judge. We don't just love, just love. But guess what? Just love and not judging is not going to fix this problem. It is going to be on people who are able to do this kind of postmodern reintegration, use discriminating wisdom while also honoring all perspectives. It is up to us to make the world better, to fix these problems, to take responsibility. So why now? Well, it might already be too late. On one hand, we need to get our shit together and get it going and like take it seriously and do something now. On the other hand, there's a bunch of steps that we need to go through. There's things that need to get established. We need to do the work. There's a bunch of work that we need to do to get our stuff together to be able to make this difference. And when we do make the difference, like make it a meaningful, impactful difference. But why now? Because the world desperately needs us. There's suffering all over this world, and it's up to us. And it's especially up to non-reductionism out of all the versions of meta theory, because integral theory doesn't have any kind of plan or any kind of big picture purpose. They're just patting themselves on the back for being so smart. Metamodernism is like, let's get a metamodernist candidate and a politician and run them. We are smart enough to know that the change is not going to happen from working within the current systems. We need to have some kind of an approach like Buckminster Fuller. He says we need to create a new system that makes the old system obsolete. That's how we need to change. So it's up to us. We have to do it, and we have to do it now. It's super important. Here's the quote. Michael put it in the chat. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So that's what we're going to do. There are going to be a lot of people who want to learn about this philosophy for their own well-being. Like earlier, Kai, you were talking to me about like, how is this going to help my business? Do you want to say something, Kai? Go ahead.
Not just to help my business, but in the question to create more meaningful interactions in these spaces.
Kai, it's a good question. You don't gotta feel defensive about it. I know you're not one of these people who only cares about business. Okay, I'm just trying to say there are going to be people who want to learn about this stuff for their own reasons about personal integration. And it starts there. It starts there for just about everyone. They're on this personal journey of figuring out philosophy and figuring out spirituality and figuring out what's going on in the world and how to relate to it. It's fine. It's natural. And if we offer better tools that will help you in your business or in this practice or in that practice, that's great. Like I said, there are going to be people who don't even necessarily care about these big picture plans. I happen to know for a fact that everybody in this meeting right now cares about that deeply. There's no question when it comes to that. But the point is that hopefully we can also, when we do attract these people into our group who care about how this worldview is going to make their life better and give them a better perspective. We can also show them how we can use these ideas to make the world better, and they'll be on board too. But like I said, the values and the morals line take a little bit of time to catch up. The cognitive line runs ahead, and then these other lines take a second. Is that a good answer to your question, Sal?
That's a perfect answer. Thank you so much.
What's your next question?
Can you tell us at least the top three telling characteristics that someone is ready to learn and apply non-reductionism? And when I'm asking this question, I'm thinking of those who like already know a version or other version of meta theories, and what can they see in themselves that tell them that, okay, I'm done with this. This is not for me. I need something else, and the something else is non-reductionism. Like for me personally, I was reaching the ceiling of like, okay, then what's the outcome? What is the plan? What's the vision? What should I do? Where do I apply? I could not see a vision where I can do that or find solutions or answers or any sort of outcome. So for these people, what can they see in themselves that tell them that at least check what we're doing or something here?
Yeah, you give a good example of one. Definitely, I think there's a lot of people who are in the meta theory community who are tired of just talking in circles about how smart we are and like saying a bunch of big words to feel intellectually superior. And they're really curious as to like, okay, now what? What are we going to do about it? So what? Like, what's the impact on the world? Like maybe they want to see like a bigger plan or something like that. Another issue is that a lot of people in these communities are starting to see that some of these meta theories, like integral, for example, have a bias integration and a pre-trans fallacy and religious assumptions at the heart of the theory. There might be people who are coming from a more pagan kind of background. Maybe they're more interested in some of these other type of traditions. And when they see that this one meta theory heavily favors one particular tradition and acts like that's the one true way or the ultimate truth of the universe, or maybe they're just more rational and like interested in what actual science has to say, then it's going to be a big turnoff to them. They're going to be like, okay, this is ungrounded. This is favoring a particular view. We're saying that we're doing a type of integration, but it's obviously a bad integration in favor of one biased perspective. So that could be another reason. People starting to see how it's not really fair overarching standards of integration, not really healthy integration in this one particular view, that they have to break their own rules. And it's baked in, it's at the heart of these theories, and it shows up corrupting most of the elements of the theory. I don't want to go too into detail there, but there's the ideas of quadrants going all the way down and back. So the idea that everything has some kind of interiority, including like the most basic stuff in the universe, like protons and electrons, as if they have consciousness, because on their model, everything has to have consciousness because everything comes from consciousness. It's the ground of all being. It's Buddhism. And also they corrupt the developmental models, both lines and stages, by stacking Aurobindo state stages on top of Piaget and on top of spiral dynamics to make it seem like these mystics are at the highest stages of development. Their map of states is the states in Buddhism, gross, subtle, causal, non-dual. It implies something about ontology. They think that basic reality, our regular way of living, the world that we live in, is gross, is like the lowest base level of things, which is the opposite of something like sacred naturalism, understanding that life is sacred and that an empty mind, like in a meditative state, is causal. Like that's the real stuff. That's the ultimate cause of the whole universe. So we want to get in touch with that, like the ground of being. So basically, everything except for types, which is hardly ever even talked about in this community as it is. We should have more talk about types, I think. There's exciting new research that's starting to be done by neuroscientists that are starting to give us more information about how types might be more grounded. I think one of the reasons why types doesn't get talked about that much is because there's a lot of these ideas that it's unscientific and not well grounded. Like Enneagram, for example, is related to the 7 deadly sins. Sometimes these ideas aren't taken that seriously. At best, they're considered to be like a helpful heuristic. And that's true for now, but I think into the future we could have more solid understanding about type, especially as we do more research into it. But yeah, the reasons why people might want to join non-reductionism is because it's more well-grounded. Like I was telling Kai earlier, there's more epistemic humility and good grounding in this version of integration. There's fair overarching standards that honors the good things in all worldviews in ways that other versions of meta theory do not. So those are a couple reasons why people who already know about meta theory might want to abandon the other versions of meta theory. I'll say one more thing about that real quick. I was recently talking to somebody who actually does like Buddhism and comes from a more Buddhist background. We were talking about how Ken Wilber thinks that the only reason that people are at higher stages of development is because they're bringing in virtues from their past life. So he doesn't think that the regular person can actually move up through stages. He thinks people are at these stages because they're more mature over multiple lifetimes, which really shoots the developmental understanding in the foot. Like, I'm hoping that as a result of having these maps, that we can help people, that we can help humanity to grow and mature and move through stages in a more healthy way. I would like to think that given a healthy society, that every adult who's healthy and has regular human functions could move up to the highest stages of development. I do think that's possible. And there's also other moral problems. I was saying in my Why Non-Reductionism is a Better Meta Theory video, Ken Wilber also said, someone asked him, why should we care? And he said, well, if you're in a dream at night and people are starving, there's two ways you can end their hunger. One is to feed them in the dream, and the other is to wake up, and it will end their suffering immediately. And I think that is a very morally problematic answer. I think even if you're coming from a Buddhist perspective and you realize all is one, everything is connected, then there needs to be more of a commitment. Like, you can't just think, well, I personally will wake up and that will solve all the problems. It's got to be like, I realize that my limited concept of self, my little ego in time space is only a small part of the absolute. And I should care about the well-being of everything. Like, part of being enlightened, I would hope, is that we realize that we're connected and we're one with all living beings, that they all matter. And so I'm not going to act like if people are starving that I can just awaken myself and feel better. So, like, I think there's moral problems with some of these ideas as well. I think that's how they end up justifying a lack of responsibility and bypassing care for feeling like they ever have to do anything. Okay, I'm ranting a little bit about the problems in these other meta theories, but I hope that I've made it clear as to why I think we can do a lot better. And that's not even getting into issues with the community and some of the racism and Trumpism and things like that that we're seeing in those spaces because they don't have good leadership or good standards for their group or any of that. That's like 5 reasons right there. Michael says you have a responsibility to the people and the systems. You waking up isn't showing that you are applying that responsibility. I agree. Like I was saying earlier, it's up to us. And we can't just sit around feeling so smart and think that that's good enough. It's not. The other answer to your question is there might be people who have never heard of meta theory, and like, how can we tell if they're ready to know about this stuff? And what we generally look for is people who are already starting to make some of the basic distinctions implicitly. They might already be saying things like, well, there's truth in all perspectives, but some ideas are more true than others. All right. Now we're getting somewhere. Even if you can say there's truth in all perspectives and some ideas might be more true than others, now you're starting to realize that all of these things have value and we can use discriminating wisdom to talk about pros and cons, healthy and unhealthy. These are important distinctions. A lot of postmodernists will just be like, I don't judge, to each their own. That's not it. But when you can start to see people who are sympathetic to all views, but who also care about what's actually true and good, that's a good sign that they are starting to already have an implicit version of integration. And that's when we can start to work with them. So that can take a bunch of different forms, but we basically want to be on the lookout for people who say implicit things that are hints at their attempt at discriminating wisdom in a postmodern reintegration.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So especially the last part about how can we as a community tell who's ready, like, hi, I can introduce it to something better, something. So yeah, this paying attention to these implicit distinctions is really, really a good way. I think we can tell through that. And personally, the top 3 for me that made it for me, actually, I feel like, okay, this is over, I need something else. If I'm really agnostic, which also implies that you're scientific or you want to do what's actually accurate, fun, like you're not spiritual in this religious dogmatic sense, you're agnostic and you are looking for moral answers or solution, not solutions that make you feel like you're smarter or like you're more advanced for the sake of advancement or development, but you're looking for things that are sustainable, long-term solutions. And to be that, you have to think of the question of how moral are these things. Number three for me is that you are done with thinking theoretically, learning, taking in the input. Now you're ready for an output. You're ready to see an application. I think to apply. I think when someone finds these, at least when I found these things in me, I was like, okay, I'm done. This is not for me. This is a stage now. Good, done. I'm glad that I learned these things. I've been there, but that's an old chapter for me. So that's what I feel like. I needed something new, and here we are.
Ready to get busy with it.
Yes.
So do you have one more question?
Yeah, just one more question. My third question is, what are the top misconceptions you think people might have about non-reductionism, and what can we like in the community or something? Because I realize how much you emphasize that it's not just the founder, it's a community thing, and I really love this aspect of non-reductionism. And what can we do about this to clear these misconceptions, to make them clear, to tell them like it's not this, it's not that, like especially as a founder, what you personally also found that people think when you put a video, what the comments think this is or something. And yeah, that's it.
I have two that jump to mind. The one that I have heard a lot from a lot of people over the years is the accusation of being a materialist and an empirical reductionist. There's a lot of anti-science types of sentiment. A lot of people also have bad ideas about quantum physics, and they think that it disproves materialism. And I think it does expand our perspective and reveal that maybe some of our misconceptions about materialism are not as true or as solid as we might have thought. But in terms of just cosmology and the understanding that consciousness is an emergent property, I don't think quantum physics has anything to do with that. And I just think in general, it's very difficult for people to get to the place where they are ready to let go of some of their religious ideas that are comforting. A lot of people still want to have a philosophy that is fun. I think that's why like a lot of people are interested in conspiracies and aliens and magic and a lot of this kind of stuff is because for them, philosophy and spirituality is more just like a fun thing. Like they don't have this idea like we're talking about of like we need to get the best ideas so that way we can be the most skillful and so that way we can make our life the best it can be and that we can help humanity and change the world to be more healthy. They're not thinking about that. They're just like, well, I like this is fun, or this makes me feel good. So those are some of the things that I see. And then maybe another one is someone said about one of the last videos, this is philosophy for people who don't like philosophy. The idea that like, because it's a simplicity on the other side of complexity, and that I'm saying things like, now you don't have to go read every single philosopher or like pore over their work, that we can just talk about the territory that they're referencing, that they're thinking that this is like lazy philosophy or something like that. One of the reasons that I got into this kind of philosophy in the beginning was because I understand that people don't have time to read everything. It's like really important that we get some of these good answers about what's going on and how to live. And sure, you can dig in deeper, you can study more philosophy, but even just having like some good maps to even contextualize some of that stuff is even helpful if you want to study philosophy. Understanding different philosophers in a developmental context, understanding what their projects are trying to deal with in the unfolding conversation of philosophy. You know, that helps for contextualizing things. So these are some of the misconceptions. Like on one hand, I think you have more academics who are maybe thinking that this stuff is overly simplistic. And I think especially with some of these new additions of like Zoom and nested quadratic holons and 4P4Z and contingent ontological factors and some of this stuff, like that stuff is like levels and levels of depth down that get into some very potentially complicated stuff. So you can dig into this stuff deep and still get some very deep stuff. I'm just now thinking also about Kai's question earlier. How do you know someone's a non-reductionist? I just want to kind of touch back on that for a second. I think that a lot of things end up in a type of synthesis. So it's like in philosophy, there are idealistic and materialistic themes, or like communal and agentic themes. Free will versus determinism, communism versus liberalism, idealism versus materialism. Non-reductionism arrives at basically a type of synthesis between a lot of these positions. It doesn't just pick one at the expense of the other, but a lot of times what it will do is it will nest some of the ideas in relation to the other one, like materialism and idealism. There are a way that certain idealistic ideas get reframed or reinterpreted in relation to or nested within the context of understanding materialism, or like potentially going forward in an antithetical dialectic response to our current situation. It would probably be good to create a new society that nests the agentic or individualistic themes in the social communal themes, right? Like a type of collective individualism as a type of synthesis. Sacred naturalism is another type of synthesis between keeping some of the attitudes of sacredness without making unfounded claims about the nature of reality that can't be proven. Semantic compatibilism. Compatibilism is a middle ground between free will and determinism. So there might be a way in which there's a synthesis even between these kinds of things. And I explained that in the past, but I can explain it again in the future. But yeah, my point is here that some of the misconceptions are going to be from people who favor one particular side at the expense of the other. And they hear you talking about one of whatever position it is, and then they just will think of you as being on the other side, not necessarily seeing the synthesis and that there might be a reason why you take on this particular synthesis in this particular way to honor both perspectives. That's where a lot of the misconceptions are going to be. Even this idea between simplicity and complexity, right? Like we're trying to harmonize both of those things. And so people who like to keep things simple are going to be like, that's too complex. And then people who like to, get into the complexity are going to be like, that's too simple. Trying to create a healthy middle ground and include both is what a lot of these versions of integration are trying to do. Does that answer your question, Sal?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that pretty much concludes all the questions that were put on the table. But before we go, I just want to kind of check back in with everybody and see how everybody's feeling. If people want to make like final statements or ask any kind of final questions or make any kind of comments about things, let's just go around one time and see where everybody's at. You want to go first, Michael?
Yeah, I think for me, the interesting thing is applying non-reductionist philosophy into different contexts and different situations. So one of the bigger things I'm trying to do is the Tower of Aces, the set of like 10 core principles for people in an abundance-centered society, initially targeting it for people who might be living on Mars, just because that's a whole different way of thinking. You can break out of all the existing traditions, ideas, all of that disappears and say, what are the best practices? And I think non-reductionism was one of those really good best practices, putting it in context within an abundance-centered society. So there's access abundance, there's closed-loop material flows, there's all sorts of things like that. But there's also this idea of around responsibility to the systems, ecosystem, social system, technical systems, and you should be dealing with that. And there's a bunch of other different concepts, including things like collective decision-making, collective sense-making, that sort of thing. And I feel like non-reductionism can help with all of that, but actually trying to apply it in those different contexts, that's going to be the interesting thing for me. That's probably going to be where I'm going to need more help from you, is how would we apply it? That said, it's something in the future where we don't know what living in that will be like. So it's hard to have an answer right now.
Michael's obviously further down the pathway here, working on some phase 3 type projects, and that's where his heart and his mind is at. And so I highly respect that. And as much as you want to work with me to help to figure out some of these things, I want you to help us, non-reductionism, figure out some of these things. And like, it sounds like you're already thinking deeply about a lot of these kinds of questions about how we can make this healthy society. And I think it's really interesting the way that you're sort of, I don't know how much of it you're thinking literally or how much of it is like a thought experiment, but this idea of like, if we're going to start a new civilization on Mars, because it's a chance for us to rethink how we could create a healthy society sort of without necessarily having to spend a bunch of time thinking about how are we going to fix the current system or reform or transition or whatever. It's like, if we were just creating this new system, how would that be healthy and what would that look like? I think that's a really interesting way to approach it. And so if you are interested to hear more of Michael talking about this stuff, he has a YouTube channel. Michael, would you plug your YouTube channel so people can know about it?
It's just Abundant Mars, sort of a bit of a podcast. There's abundantmars.com. I've only got 3 episodes at the moment. They are like 40 minutes to an hour and a half. I do need to get 2 more episodes out to finish that sort of Tower Aces section, and then I can start putting some of the interviews I've already done, like the good one you and I had together. But yeah, I'm also a bit in your way of things are taking longer because I want them to have good foundations. I want to go do all that research to make sure, like, does this make sense? And as for the approach, if you go look at any really good forms of evolution, you'll find, let's say some birds go fly off to an island, and then on a, this much smaller island, there's a particular tree that the way the fruit, it's just that little bit harder, and they had to get, longer beaks, and then there's this like evolution cycle that happens, and then over the course of a few generations, suddenly these birds grow much longer beaks. And then they fly back to the mainland and find that maybe it indicates sexual competence or whatever it might be. It suddenly is, they've done this very fast evolution. They bring it back to the main society. And almost always the main ways of evolution are these sort of, you go do it on a much smaller bit and bring it back, and then in some ways almost outcompete the existing system. And it's that whole Buckminster Fuller thing, creating a new model. So that's why it's so important. I think we've got maybe 8 years before there are not just like a couple of people living on Mars, but we're actually starting to have people thinking about properly living on Mars. I mean, if someone just handed me, like $200 million, I would be going and working on this full time. There's the society dynamic component and there's the technical bits. I think it needs both, because the idea of access abundance and closed loop material flows, like you're building things to last a long time. You're building things where you want a shared tool shed and easily could just grab the things that you need. But you also need the society dynamics of saying, oh, someone's got that. And instead of being angry about it, it's like, well, do we have a scheduling system? Do we build more of these things? How do you cope with these problems? And I think that they both kind of need to evolve together.
Were you involved in the Zeitgeist movement as well?
Yes, I've got to work on the Zeitgeist community website.
I was heavily inspired by the Zeitgeist movement and stuff as well. They had a lot of very inspirational content, and I was kind of learning some of this meta theory at the same time, and I was starting to think about how they had especially solutions as it relates to particular aspects of the project, but there's a lot of these other projects, like you're saying, more interior, community-based parts of it that still need to be fleshed out. Yeah, that's exciting, man.
Yeah, I could tell you're heavily influenced by the Zeitgeist movement, the way you're approaching things, and that hint of capitalism isn't all that great. We can have better systems. There are alternative economic systems, post-monetary, post-scarcity societies that we should be aiming towards. So, yeah.
That's what's up.
Yes.
I really appreciate you coming today and asking these really good questions. And of course, I really appreciate your continued support through Patreon. And yeah, I'm excited to continue to work with you and to answer more of your questions and have more of these times and talks together. And yeah, you guys should definitely go check out his YouTube page and see what more things he has to say. Make sure you like and subscribe to that. What's up, Kai? How you feeling?
Yeah, feeling great. It's been a fantastic talk. I guess the thing I would just ask is kind of building off of Sal's last question, just kind of like how can we kind of help somebody work around some of the misconceptions around the theory? Some of the criticisms I've seen have been like, how is it non-reductionism if you're naming it? Like if you're saying that this is the meta theory, and then how is it non-reductionist, right? Because then it's like, well, then it makes it reductionist. I know it's not a very good criticism, but like I get this when talking with people. And then just the meta community in general, mainly integral, they're concerned with like some of the similarities in the theory, and they feel like it's their theory.
Yeah. Well, even Wilbur was accused of stealing a bunch of other people's ideas. Like, it seems like the only thing that he really brought to the table was quadrants, which is just a common thing, like divisions of four applied to ontology. Besides that, he made some like meta distinctions. So I would just say in philosophy, that's what always happens. People stand on the shoulders of the people who came before them. They critique some of their work. They take some of their work and they change it and they upgrade it and they add some extra stuff on top. And that's what it is. Marx took Hegel's dialectic and stood it on its head and said that he stood it right side up. And now we have dialectical materialism. That's how philosophy works. So let's see. That's one part of it. The other part was how can you say it's non-reductionism when it's a particular view, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a fair overarching set of standards to integration. And it includes the good things from all views. So yeah, I mean, we do end up with particular views, but it's not a bias integration. It could include things from every perspective, but in a fair overarching way that also honors the good things from other perspectives. So it's called non-reductionism because the opposite of non-reductionism is when someone is being reductionist. In other
Right.
words, they favor one view at the expense of other views. We don't do that. We only care about what's good and true. We align ourselves with that. We take good things where we find them and we reject bad things where they show up. We do it in a sympathetic way. I really like this one saying of like, if you can't say why something is good or true or beautiful, then you're not qualified to criticize it. So it's like, some people you talk to them about psychology and you bring up Freud, for example, and they'll be like, ew, Freud. And it's like, okay, yeah, I could maybe see why you would say, ew, Freud. He got some things wrong, but he's also the first word on this whole field of science. So, like right now, if you can't say at least two or three good things about Freud, then I'm going to wonder why you're saying ooh, Freud, and like why you're having that kind of a harsh response to this. I
Right.
think it's like that with everything.
Yeah, definitely. So when talking with people about this, is most people just are reactionary to ideas and concepts, and even when just talking to them in a sympathetic way, trying to open up the ideas, I find not a lot of people are willing to be sympathetic if they already kind of have their team.
Well, if the claim is that our view is better, if you can't steelman our view, then you're not qualified to judge whether or not it's better. I say that our view is better, and I can say why it's better because I know both views, right? So
Yeah.
you're not really qualified to say what's better unless unless you can. I'm seeing Michael's posting something on here like, can you say what's good, true, or beautiful about Trump being in office?
Not
Really
sure about the
challenging me.
beautiful part though.
The only beautiful things coming out of that is just the embodiment of the destroyer
Kai's
in
taking
life.
on the challenge.
The destroyer, so that hopefully you can build something good on the back end of
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, one good thing is that he's definitely making it very clear how corrupt our current system is.
that.
That's
Yeah.
one good thing. Another good thing is it's good to see how it could be possible to make a big influence and a big change within our current system. People have this idea of like, oh, things will always just be how they are, like they get so used to things being in a particular way that that's just how they think things are. So that's a good thing. And I'm sure if I dug deep enough into Trump's policies and I put them all on the table and looked at them all, I bet I could find a couple good ones in there where I could be like, well, he's kind of right about that. Of course, it's massively overwhelmed by all the
Yeah.
bad things, but it's in general beautiful to have a community of people who support you and to have a sense of community around that. I think that's a beautiful thing about almost all traditions and worldviews is that it's beautiful to have a sense of community and to feel like we're doing something and that we're making a change, even if it's misguided and unhealthy. So yeah, is that rising to the challenge? He's happy with that, okay. But yeah, it's
that was a good
word. But yeah, I mean, if you can't say some stuff like that, then you probably aren't being as fair as you could be. Is there anything else you want to say, Kai, before we move on?
No, that was good.
Hey, thanks so much for coming and thanks for your support. I want to give Kai an extra special thanks because Kai has had my back and helped me with a lot of my projects for a lot of years. Whenever I'm working on videos, I always ask Kai what he thinks and I send him versions of my video. Kai's really good with cameras and video production stuff, and sometimes he helps me with color correction or tells me how I can fix my camera to help make it better. And yeah, I really appreciate you, Kai. You are super helpful. And if you think that the videos are looking good on the channel or that things are getting aesthetically beautiful and stuff like that, it's because Kai helped me. So big thanks to you, Kai.
Well, I appreciate that. It's because of all the good work that you already do and have done.
Thank you, buddy. Last but not least, Sal, how you doing? You have any final thoughts or anything you want to say at the end here?
It's not really like thoughts, it's more like I'm sharing feelings here. Like
Okay.
going back to the last thing you said about cultivating a sense of community is really important and it's really healthy, especially for kind of people like us who thinks and see the world in this particularly, we'll see, like, not so friendly way. It's really nice to come together and talk about it and feel like we're not gonna lose our minds because we have other people to talk to, luckily, about all this and more. So this, like, I want to say thank you for cultivating this sense of the community. Is a huge part of actually, at least how I saw it as part of being in non-reductionism, is that you get to be heard. You get to come Q&As, get your answers. You get to be in the workforce of finding actually what is the best solution? What is the answer? What should we do about this knowledge? And being part of it, it's definitely gonna lead to you feeling the sense of belonging to a community who are like-minded. And this is really great. This is making me as an individual feeling more healthy in my own as well. So
Yeah.
thank you for that, really. This what we're
Yeah.
having right now is like really great part of that actually.
You're not finding this in your everyday, just going around and so
Definitely.
this is
Might
very,
not even.
very exceptional and unique and special. Yeah.
Respect you guys. And this is just the beginning. The community is going to grow and we'll figure out more fun things to do together. Last time in the community, we were making memes together and we were doing all kinds of fun stuff and having prizes. And we'll figure out ways to get all that kind of stuff going again. And this time we'll grow even bigger. And eventually we'll be able to have meetups in person. I'll travel around and we'll be seeing each other face to face. Like Michael, I can't wait to come to where you're at. I'm sure that you can probably get some stuff started where you're at. And I got a lot of love for especially the first supporters because it really means a lot. You guys are stepping out there and believing in something. It's always extra difficult to believe in something in the beginning. So I want to let you know that I really appreciate that. And I'm really dedicated to trying to make it bigger and better and to grow it and to make it better all the time. And so I want us to have a more healthy community. I want us to have more space and more opportunity to be able to share together and to meet together and to connect. It's super important. So much love to you all. Before I go, I do want to shout out some of my other Patreons who aren't on here today. I want to give a big shout out to Jacqueline Elizabeth. I hope you're doing well. I also want to give a shout out to Huso Vilmunen. I hope I'm saying I'm probably butchering the name.
Is that Uso from Kodokawa?
You know him?
Uso. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know him.
Uso, hit me up, man. Send me a message personally. I'd love to talk with you. Uso has been a longtime supporter, so big respect to Uso. Thank you so much, man. And Steve Buss. Steve Buss, thank you so much. He's helping me with some of my 4P, 4Z stuff and like trying to get a book for that going together. Big props, big thanks to you, buddy. And again, thanks to everyone here. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Kai. Thanks, Sal. Thanks to everybody watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Share these videos with people who you think might like it. Yeah, we're building this non-reductionism thing. So I'll see you in the next video. Peace.